When you're making video games, one of the worst things you can do is to be stuck in the past with a bad reputation. There are two kinds of companies, ones that innovate and ones that follow the leader when it comes to said innovative games. This has happened a lot. For example, with BioShock. From the format of the game, with you, the player, going into an unknown area where everything has gone badly while trying to find audio logs to find out what happened and to escape alive, to the plot twist that has now become a cliche due to the fact that so many other games have adapted the same exact trademark plot twist, with even some kids' games such as the Pokemon Mystery Dungeon series using it. There are so many other influential games too, from the Grand Theft Auto series and early open world games, which helped make open world games a big thing to the point where you had all these games that were open world, such as driving games and the like, to computer role playing games and console role playing games with pen and paper style customization systems becoming big, from Fallout to the first Mass Effect to the first Deus Ex to Shin Megami Tensei and many other games like this. However, some companies choose to stay in the past, not changing anything, and not willing to put anything into the game that might offend anybody. Nintendo is a very good example. Even when they were big, they had some censorship, especially to shield themselves from attacks on their Kiddy toy store image. So many games that were uncensored on the Famicom had to be censored for the American releases. They had a whole list of guidelines banning things such as sexually suggestive content, which meant nude statues had to be clothed, for example, strong language, graphic violence, domestic violence, symbols related to any religious group, Red Cross symbols used in hospitals or medical kits, Nazi symbols such as in Wolfenstein 3D, alcohol or drug references, and similar things. This ended up hurting Nintendo later on, however, as Sega allowed far more content, which allowed games such as Mortal Kombat to go uncensored on Sega platforms, and many Nintendo and Super Nintendo games were censored. Games popular nowadays, such as the Shin Megami Tensei series, would have required heavy censorship from the demon designs to the religious overtones and the mature themes of the series. While many games would have caused controversy in the 90s political climate, times have changed now. You can get away with nearly anything in a video game as long as it does not involve sex, and as long as the game does not violate any laws. It's possible to freely release a game yourself online, with games such as Postal 2, The Binding of Isaac, which was in fact actually banned from Nintendo's eShop, and Nintendo would not allow them to sell it on the 3DS, and other similar games being released on the PC. In fact, there are a few AO games that have been released digitally. Now, keep in mind, in the US, very few games are rated AO, as retailers will refuse to carry them. The same with NC-17 movies, which is why many movies are actually somewhat censored for the theoretical release, and then the uncut version, which was originally rated NC-17, will just be released in stores as the unrated version. Now, Nintendo, on the other hand, they're still trapped in the past. While they now allow M-rated games and have actually published some games such as Eternal Darkness, Conquer, Metal Gear Solid, The Twin Snakes, or even first-person shooters such as Perfect Dark, GoldenEye, or Metroid Prime, or even today with Devil's Third being picked up from the remains of THQ, or Bayonetta 2 being published by them, they still don't want to develop anything that pushes any sort of limit. The closest they probably came was the late Super Nintendo era when they lifted the content restrictions that kept games such as Mortal Kombat from being uncensored, to the late GameCube era when Nintendo was releasing some more hardcore-ish games, but of course the Wii came and Nintendo has gone the totally opposite direction. For example, let's take a look at Pokemon. They've already done it to an extent. Pokemon games since Black and White lack the game quarter, and all non-Japanese versions of Heart Gold and Soul Silver actually have a censored game corner which replaces the slot machines with a Minesweeper clone. Why? Well, one rating board somewhere considered it gambling and would have given it a 12 and up rating. However, that's not the only time Nintendo has self-censored or held back for the sake of it, and you see it's actually gotten even worse since then. You see, Splatoon is a very good example of Nintendo trying to appeal to the youngest target demographic they possibly can in an attempt to censor their creativity. While the games I mentioned earlier were being made by developers such as Rare, Silicon Knights, and the like, Splatoon is being made by Nintendo themselves. The news website Kotaku did an interview with the creators of the game. Now, the concept for the game is pretty damn bland. I mean, I swear, if the game wasn't being published by Nintendo, nobody would be interested in it. Remember how many people were interested in the PlayStation Move and Kinect games from about 2010, 2011, when they were taking a break from making games that were kind of interesting in an attempt to make all these casual games? Well, that's what Splatoon feels like. One of those games. And of course, the concept for it is kind of unoriginal too. But here's the major part in this article. When asked by Kotaku if they played Call of Duty and Battlefield, they said they play those type of games. Now keep in mind, not only does this say that Nintendo obviously isn't 100% original, but it starts to imply something. That they're trying to make a dumbed down version of Call of Duty's Domination or Battlefield's Conquest mode for kids. I mean, this is not the only attempt at making a kid friendly game with shooting in it for strict parents who won't get their kid the real thing. Just look at Plants vs. Zombies Garden Warfare. That game could be considered a kid's version of Battlefield 4, just with Plants and Zombies, down to the fact that it has a clone of the Rush mode, down to the fact that it has classes, down to the fact it has a commander mode. But, anyways, what I'm about to say next actually proves my theory that this is indeed a kid's version of Battlefield's Conquest or Call of Duty's Domination with color splashing straight out of the Wii game, The Blob. Games industry said that Miyamoto, one of the key people at Nintendo when it comes to creating first-party games and who helped create Donkey Kong, Mario, Zelda, and various other franchises that became well known for being on Nintendo platforms, said that most of the games shown at E3 2014 were, quote, bloody shooter software, end quote, realistic and cool worlds. Now, this is ironic considering how many Nintendo published games, including some he's helped on, such as Metal Gear Solid Twin Snakes and Metroid Prime, were in said realistic worlds with guns. However, not only that, but he said that creativity was immature in gaming. To make things funnier, this is coming from the company that decides to release several 2D Mario games in a year and the company which has turned Pokemon into the new Infinity Ward Call of Duty. Except instead of with first person shooters, with Japanese role playing games, with new games coming every year, and the company that releases a new game with Zelda branding in a series criticized for rehashing Hyrule Warriors. So keep in mind, Miyamoto, one of the top people when it comes to Nintendo developing games, views other games as bloody shooter software. Now, what does this say about Nintendo? Well, not only does it say that they're pretty ignorant to the current state of gaming, I mean, let's be honest here, there were plenty of games like Little Big Planet or The Witcher 3 or The New Dragon Age that really couldn't be considered, quote, bloody shooter software, but that Nintendo is also doing a pretty bad job of shedding that Kiddy game image they've built up over the years, especially as Sony, Microsoft, and all the PC developers keep providing a bigger variety of games than Nintendo can ever wish to have. Games are skipping out on the Nintendo Wii U, and you're seeing console exclusives, Microsoft and Sony console cross-gen exclusives, multi-platform games skipping the Wii U, with massive game droughts and games which lack mass appeal outside of a small and shrinking fanbase that shares Miyamoto's views on gaming. And at this point, Nintendo is going to need new management and new creative talent, or they are going to end up like other companies did in the past. And at this rate, they have become just like 90s Apple. I mean, sure, 90s Apple had a bunch of weird products such as the QuickTake digital camera and the Apple Newton PDA line, but nobody was buying those things, nor were they buying Macintoshes, as their core line of computer was becoming outdated compared to the competition. Especially when you have Windows 95, which looked far more advanced than, say, Mac OS when you compared it to it, and they had to bring in Steve Jobs and his operating system, which was Next Step, and they had to reskin it so it was Mac OS 10. And then what happened was they finally started making profits after they retargeted their whole computer line and dropped a ton of products that were just selling poorly. Or you can use Steve Ballmer era Microsoft as a good example. I mean, while the Xbox 360 sold a bunch and so did Windows, you had stuff such as Windows Phone coming out late instead of, like, let's just say earlier on, with Windows Mobile 6.5 being a stopgap release. You had their Zune, which was a pretty good MP3 player, but it was trying to compete with the iPod lineup right when the iPhone was about to kill the MP3 player market. And of course, let's not forget other companies that are already dead, such as Kodak or Palm, because they could not adapt to the new market and ended up getting thrown by the wayside in a competitive market. And when you're in a competitive market such as technology, you have to adapt. Just look at how, for a while, the iPhone's selling point was it has the most apps. People aren't going to buy a smartphone with no apps. People aren't going to buy a game console with very few games. And it doesn't matter if it's $100 less and can play games from a console mostly known for Wii Sports. If you have few games or software and your CEO just starts writing off every single other piece of software your competition has as, quote, bloody shooter games, you're going to have issues, especially in the market. And that's just what's happening to Nintendo. People don't want Nintendo outside of that fan base. And despite Mario Kart 8 giving the Wii U a sales boost, it's got no momentum. I won't be surprised when the Wii U sales dip yet again because people got over the Mario Kart 8 hype and are now moving on to, I don't know, buying other games that aren't available on the Wii U. Because the Wii U, it's got little to no games. And remarks like calling other games bloody shooter software are not helping. Because let's be honest here, Nintendo has no more monopoly. If people say stuff they don't like and if they alienate developers, they're just going to pack their bags and leave. That's all. Thanks for watching, subscribe for more, and enjoy your bloody shooter software such as Little Big Planet and Project Spark.